Welcome in to episode 4 of the college football season. Just seems to be flying by already as we are already in week 4. This is, of course, the Merrifield Sportsbook Show. I'm Nick Burt, of course, joined always Jada Coster, Matt Merrifield, Justin Walsh. Gentlemen, we are back for another week of college football, and we'll get to it in a minute. Our locks, we're slowly climbing back. We hit 500 this week. Somebody still has yet to get a win. We'll get to that, but we went 3-1. So I think that's pretty good, all in all. But I mean, Jay, we'll start with you. It's been a week since we last reconvened. You had a pretty decent week, I'd say. You're starting to climb back up after your just terrible week last week. Or 2 weeks ago, I should say. So slowly getting back to it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, slowly but surely. I mean, we got I think my best pick was the Kentucky Georgia under. I mean, that was just a lock from the beginning. I mean, no offense wanted to be playing that game. And then the Indiana pick, I mean, we all rode with that. And then, hey, light the sig because Indiana football's back and they will be ranked in a couple weeks. So slowly but surely we're climbing up. So it was good stuff. I liked it. So,
Matt, you also got your lock correct once again. That Missouri game, it looked bad at first. What?
Mizzou didn't cover.
Oh, they didn't. Oh,
No.
I completely messed up the graphic then. So, okay, never mind, Matt. You got that wrong. Totally forget what I just said. That totally is going to get cut out here, but. Yeah, Matt, real struggle for Missouri on Saturday for your lock. Not great.
I told a lot of people that Missouri was going to kick some ass last weekend, and they got off to the world's slowest start. And I'm just glad they won. I did not expect Thomas Castellanos to play the best game throwing-wise he's ever had, and maybe ever will, hopefully ever will, considering they play State this weekend. But I would like you mentioned Indiana. I would like to start the train now that on October 19th, when they are undefeated heading in, actually they host Nebraska. Both teams will be undefeated on October 19th. Other notable games that day, Alabama, Tennessee, and that's also Texas, Georgia. I want college game day in Bloomington for the first time ever, but that's besides the point. But that train needs to start now. People need to realize that the Big Ten, the two best teams or the two most entertaining teams in the Big Ten this year will be meeting, and game day should be there. Doesn't matter. They don't have the rights to the game. ESPN needs to be there. But besides the point, I talked with you, Nick, about I reframed my decision-making for my parlay this week after a 3-3 week this week, and I completely abandoned it, and we're going to roll with these picks anyways. I think we're good. I think I'm feeling good about this week. I like this slate. We're at a good point in the season, but I said I wasn't going to make any picks until this morning, and Monday morning at 9 a.m., my parlay was made, my graphic is set, and the parlay was placed with one of my many free bets I still have left over from last weekend. So we'll see, but stay advised. This is not gambling advice.
I mean, it's outstanding non-gambling advice from the president of the very fictitious Merrifield Sportsbook. Jay Walsh, you are the one that is still searching for a lock. I mean, that Kansas game last week, whew, that was something.
I should have known better than to trust Jalen Daniels. I have had my opinions about Jalen Daniels. I thought they were in for a bounce back, but I guess that serves me right for betting against Michigan State legend Ricky White. I mean, I was feeling the Jayhawks last week, but they let me down. Still searching for that first lock victory, but hoping to get it this week. So we're keeping it alive, keeping it going. Let's just stack it one win at a time. Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you always do have to start somewhere. As soon as you get one, I'm sure you're going to get 2 and then 3 after that. It's got to come eventually.
Exactly.
I think last week my lock was Cal. Shout out Cal. They looked bad in the first half. They cleaned it up second half. The students started throwing cards on the field. Justin Wilcox had to get on the referee's mic to tell them to stop throwing because of I think they would have got 2 15-yarders penalties. I actually think they did, but that's besides the point. We're going to figure it out this week. This week feels like the week the lock parlay hits. We'll get into it later, but let's start off this week. This is more of a heavier slate than it was last week. Still feel like we're missing some of the big names. A lot of big names have bye weeks this week, but we still move on. First big game of the week. It is the first time these two are meeting at a stadium not called the Rose Bowl since the 50s. It is USC traveling up to Ann Arbor to face off against Michigan. USC is a 5.5-point favorite. The over-under is 44.5. Matt, we'll start with you. Michigan making a quarterback change this week. It is orgy time for Michigan as Davis Warren, who did not technically throw a pass away last week. He completed all his passes, except 3 of them were interceptions. This week going up against a tough USC team off a bye. Do you think this quarterback change is going to do much for Michigan?
No, because as bad of a passer as Davis Warren is, Alex Orji can't hit the broadside of a barn. Very good athlete, great at doing backflips. Unfortunately, that's not going to help them against the USC defense that appears to be pretty good. It doesn't have to be that good against a Michigan offense that has looked horrid against some pretty bad teams like Arkansas State. Fresno State is a good group of 6 team, but still, this offense for Michigan hasn't looked good at all. And I think this USC defense is going to continue to just slowly get better. And on the other side, Michigan's defense has been fine, but it hasn't been world-class like everybody expected it to be. And Miller Moss, I think if his Heisman campaign is for real, which some people are on the train of, I am not, it could really pick up some steam this weekend, going into the big house and picking up a win. I love USC this weekend, especially right now. If the number's 5.5, I think if it gets to 6.5 or 7.5, it could get a little tough, even though I think they should be fine. But at 5.5, I think they can very much win this game by a touchdown.
Matt, you did mention, Heisman pushes. Do you want to disavow any of your previous Heisman pushes about a certain Arizona quarterback? Just quickly off topic.
I would like to retract any statements I made preseason about the Arizona Wildcats, both as a team and in regards to their quarterback, Noah Fafita, who is literally a Tedero McMillan merchant, and that's might be the only reason he has gotten this far, because oh my God, was he bad against Kansas State on Friday night. And I can't believe I should have known the 7 points was too many, and it was Vegas always knows, and that was just bad. It was bad football. Tedero McMillan still should be the number 1 receiver taken off the board, and I think he's going to be an all-pro wide receiver at the next level. But the rest of Arizona can kick rocks. Fafita, Colt Brennan, and Brent Brennan, not Colt Brennan, Brent Brennan, and that entire defense. The rest of Arizona can kick rocks. But yeah, so I just want to get that out there. UCF is my new Big 12 team.
Jay Walsh, we'll get back to the Michigan game now. I just felt like I need to give Matt that little bit of air really quick. But it feels like we saw a little bit of an emergence finally this season from that Michigan run game that we've just heard so much about this year. Still wasn't great, but it feels like that's kind of a key for them to do anything this year. This USC defense, I'm probably going to cause that run game trouble once again, don't you think?
It will. I mean, it's obviously when you think of a Lincoln Riley-led team, you don't necessarily think defense first, but this USC team is kind of bucking that trend. I mean, they have definitely looked good so far. Obviously, against an inferior Utah State team, they took care of business, but in their opening game against LSU, they gave up a decent amount of yards through the air to Garrett Nussmeier, but they really kind of, for the most part, held a very athletic LSU team relatively in check on the ground, holding John Emery to, I think it was like 60 yards or something like that. So, I mean, they are definitely a lot more stout of a defense than the kind of cupcakes that Michigan has played outside of Texas, which we all saw how that game went. So I'm gonna get a little bit more into this game a little bit later because this game is featured in my picks. If I had to pick between the two, I would probably lean USC just for the same reason as Matt, as I could easily see them winning this game by a touchdown. I think 5.5 is a very good number for them. And then like I said, one of my picks in my parlay is this game. I'm gonna preview it now. I'm taking the under. I actually was able to get it at 46.5, but I think 44.5 is still a reasonable play simply because I think this is a game that USC could easily win like 20 to like 17 or something like that. So I think the under is a very reasonable play here.
Jay, coming into this game, USC is off the bye. Do you think that's going to play a huge factor for them off that hot start with those 2 wins against LSU and Utah State? Or do you think it just gives them more rest against a Michigan team that feels like it's been in a dogfight all 3 games they've played so far this season?
I was going to say the bye does play a factor. I mean, it plays a factor for a lot of teams. I mean, you get that extra rest. Michigan's coming off, a 28-18 game against Arkansas State. And yeah, I'm with Jay Walsh. I think the under is the play here. And Matt, with Matt, I do have this game on my parlay as well. I would lean USC in this spot just because USC has a proven passing game, and also their defense is much better than they were last year with the new defensive coordinator hire. Yeah, I just think, look, Alex Orji, we don't know if he can throw a forward pass. Probably not. Davis Warren obviously was not the answer. And yeah, I mean, just Michigan at the quarterback position is just a huge, huge question mark right now, and it's not a good one. So therefore, I would definitely take the under, and I think USC coming off the bye, to answer your question, Nick, that does really help them.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of all are somewhat in agreement that the USC -5.5 is the play here. I'm kind of, for me, myself, I'm not going to touch the over-under, but I do kind of lean a bit more towards the over just because I think this game could get out of hand for Michigan, just like the Texas game did. And then, you see USC put up 30 or 35, and then all you need is Michigan to score, like a touchdown or 2, and you're at that over. I think there's a possibility of that. I do think there's a better chance that it ends up being a low scoring game, like you said, Jay Walsh and Jay. I feel like this game could get away from Michigan really quick if they, don't pounce on those immediate like USC mistakes, because it does feel like USC started that LSU game a little bit slow. Obviously, they grew into the game really quick after that, but I think USC's got a good shot to get their first Big Ten conference victory this weekend in their first opportunity. So we'll move on to the second game that we have on the sheet this week. It is the battle of 20th year quarterbacks. It is Utah traveling to Stillwater to face Oklahoma State. Utah is a 1.5 point favorite. The over-under is 54.5. Jay Walsh, as I just mentioned, this is the battle of the 50-year-old quarterbacks. Alan Bowman, Cam Rising. I think Cam Rising is back from injury this week, but I mean, that statement feels like it's been said the past 20 years because he gets injured every year. This game has the feeling that it's going to be quite intriguing, doesn't it?
It does. And I would just like to point out, I graduated from Michigan State almost exactly 2 years ago at this point, and this game features 2 starting quarterbacks that are both older than I am. So, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous, but that's kind of where we're at these days with college football. But yeah, this is a very interesting game for that reason and for a number of reasons. I mean, going into the season, Utah was my pick to win the Big 12. I think they are going into the season. I really thought that, they have a great reputation as just kind of a physical team. They're just going to kind of wear you down throughout the game. They've looked decent. They haven't looked they haven't looked the part of a kind of Power 4 conference champion in the games that they've played against decent opponents. Against Baylor, I think they won like 23-12 or something. Which obviously a win is a win, but it certainly wasn't kind of eye-catching or anything like that. The thing that I am kind of looking at in this game is possibly what people, a lot of people, including myself, thought of Ollie Gordon as kind of by far the best running back in the country going into this year. He has really kind of had a relatively underwhelming season. I mean, the season opener against South Dakota State, he ran for 126 yards, 3 touchdowns. Solid day for the boy. But after that, he has failed to get over 50 yards, and he has found the end zone once in the last 2 games. So I'm really looking for him to kind of assert himself as the guy in this game. I do think he has the capability to do that. So for that reason, I'm going to take the Pokes at home. The over-under, I don't necessarily love that line. I would probably lean under just because I think this is going to be a kind of physical, grinding game. But I could easily see it going over that 54.5 number. But I do like Oklahoma State plus 1.5 in this spot.
Jay Walsh mentioned, and I had it on my notes, and then he so much stole my point about Ollie Gordon kind of starting off slow to this season. It seems like he's very much been passed up as, we all said that he was going to be, one of the best running backs this season and possibly a Heisman frontrunner. He just hasn't lived up to those expectations. What do you think is kind of like the biggest reasoning behind that? Do you think like he can get back to where everybody expected him to be now that we're getting into conference season?
Well, I don't know if I have a reasoning behind it, but he is one of the best backs in the country, and he has the high expectations. He's definitely going to need to get it going if Oklahoma State wants to compete for the Big 12. I agree, because he's the heart and soul of that team. He's their leader. Mike Gundy relies on him a lot, and you need him to perform in these big games in the Big 12. And this is a big game for them this weekend. You're going to need him to give him the rock at least like over 20 times, because this is a huge game in the Big 12. Utah is the favorite in the Big 12 right now. Oklahoma State is not far behind them. Yeah, I mean, Ollie Gordon needs to step up here, and he's a Heisman contender before the season. Not right now, but I mean, if he shows up in these games, then possibly. So, I would say I'm actually going Utah on the spot. I think if Cam Rising is, if he's gonna play, which we think he is, and if he's healthy, I think he can tear that defense apart. And I think Utah's just the better football team. I think I'm really high on Utah this year. I think they can definitely win the Big 12. Them and Kansas State. Yeah, I'm gonna go Utah plus the 1.5, or I think it's minus 1.5 now. I thought it was minus 1.5, but I think Jay Walsh said plus the 1.5 or whatever it was. So I will lean Utah on the spot, but I wouldn't be surprised if it go either way. But Utah is the better football team in the spot, in my opinion.
And Matt, speaking of Utah State, I mean, I know Jay just slipped up and mentioned them there, but that is who Utah faced last week, and they kind of struggled with them. They were on the road at Utah State in Ogden, Utah, I believe is where they are. I don't know. But Oklahoma State was in Tulsa last week, and they just blew the doors off of the Golden Hurricanes. Do you think either of those games have an effect coming to this week? And what do you think ends up happening in this game?
I think the best 2 teams both these teams have played was 2 weeks ago in week 2. You had Utah took on Baylor, and then Oklahoma State took on Arkansas. Oklahoma State took on Arkansas. And obviously both teams struggled a bit in that game. Arkansas probably should have won that game in Stillwater. But if you notice, like, even though Utah hasn't played the best the last couple of weeks, they are running the football extremely well. And Oklahoma State got ran through like a wet paper bag against Baylor. And I don't love this Oklahoma State defense. And I do trust this Utah defense with Kyle Whittington. I think I do like Utah in this game now. be advised on where you get the line in this game, because in one spot I see it's listed as Oklahoma State is 2.5-point favorites. Utah is a favorite on the sportsbook I use. It's Utah plus 1.5, but the money line is minus 110. So Vegas thinks this game's a pick 'em. And I would roll with Utah in this game because we saw Arkansas went into Stillwater a couple weeks ago and gave them a hell of a game. I understand Boone Pickens is one of the tougher places to play, but Utah is used to playing in some tough environments. They've played Oregon the last couple of years. They go to Washington, so it's no new situation for them to be playing in these top 15 matchups. So I think the better quarterback is Cam Rising. I am not an Alan Bowman guy whatsoever. So I'm definitely going to go with Utah here.
Yeah, and I mean, all of you brought up very good points. The biggest point for me, and Matt just brought it up, is Oklahoma State really struggled with Arkansas a few weeks ago, and I can't overlook that because Arkansas does not look to be like an outstanding team this year. I think Utah wins this game. We're going to move to. I mean, I'm excited for this game. It probably ends up being a blowout, but I'm excited for it at least. Tennessee, Tennessee's on fire right now. They are traveling to Norman to take on Oklahoma. Oklahoma's first SEC game. Tennessee is a 7.5-point favorite. The over/under is 56.5. Jay, we'll start with you. This Tennessee team, they seem legit this year. I know that they faced NC State, which I think NC State's okay, but that's the best team they faced this year. Last week, they killed Kent State. That was just brutal. Matt, you had that game on lock. Yeah. Jay,
people laughed at me for taking them with that many points, and they covered before halftime.
Yeah,
I don't think people expected them to. I don't think
Kent
people
State
expected
sucks.
them to have. I don't think people expected them to have an onside kick up 30 in the first quarter.
Be better, Kent State.
But
One last thing, I would like it known that the line in the Oklahoma State game has moved in the last 5 minutes. It's now up to 2.5, and the money line even moved too. So that's
Wow.
where we're at with that football game. So stay advised, people.
Okay, Jay, Tennessee, they're looking really good. Oklahoma, I mean, they're not terrible. They're not great, but this kind of has the feelings of a Iamalava legacy game, kind of. He's just going to throw it all over the field against this Oklahoma team.
It's tough because how about 64-0 at the half? I mean, yeah, you're right, Matt. Be better, Kent State. What was that at the half too? I don't know. Tennessee's a really good football team. I am buying the stock of them this year, but I don't know. It's at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's not great, but it's at Norman at night. That's a tough environment to go into, especially for a true freshman quarterback. I don't know. I would probably go Tennessee here. I don't love it though. Tennessee's really, really good, and Oklahoma's first SEC game is against a really, really good football team. At Norman at night though is tough, and that's why I'm a little hesitant. But I will probably lean the Vols minus 7.5 here. I just think, look, they just look unbeatable right now. I mean, Nico Iamaleava is the real deal right now. As of right now, he looks like the real deal at Tennessee. And James Pierce was a wrecking crew back there on that defense. He's going to be a top draft pick in the NFL. They got a great defense, all other guys as well. So I probably lean Tennessee here. It just depends on how Jackson Arnold plays because he looked decent against Tulane, but in the other games he just hasn't looked that great. And also Jackson Arnold's just a younger guy as well. So it just depends on how he plays. But yeah, I'll probably lean Tennessee in this spot.
Matt, as was mentioned, this Oklahoma's first SEC game. Obviously, their first three non-conference games, I should say. I mean, you had the Temple game where they won 51-3, but then they struggled with Houston. Felt like a little bit of a bounce back last week with the win against Tulane. Does it kind of feel like Oklahoma may not be ready for what the SEC has to offer?
Well, it's tough because, and everybody keeps talking about Nico I with Tennessee, and he has been very good and very impressive. But this run game for Tennessee, and this has been the case for the last couple of years under Josh Heupel. Like, yes, Hendon Hooker was a very good quarterback and probably should have been higher up in the Heisman finalists in 2022. I mean, Joe Milton was Joe Milton last year, and there's a reason that team went 8-4 before winning their bowl game. But this running attack is insane, and it's just line up and run the football right down your throat, and then line up and run the football right down your throat. And that's a lot of fun to watch. For this game specifically, I've started to learn that Vegas loves to set lines. Like we saw it with Tennessee, NC State a couple weeks ago. The line was 7.5, and that was a neutral site. Last week, Arizona, Kansas State, 7.5. This feels like a similar situation. Like, is it too many points? But Tennessee might be that good. And I do think Oklahoma is still better than Arizona and NC State. But I think Tennessee is still really, really good. And it feels like too many. I didn't actually place a pick on this game, maybe at 7:30 on Saturday night. I feel differently and place a couple doubloons on Tennessee. So it's not going to be a part of my parlay, but I feel like Vegas knows it's that big for a reason for Tennessee.
And Jay Walsh, I did kind of want to bring up that point that Matt mentioned. Does feel a little bit like this line is 7.5 for a road game. I believe that's the line we also saw for Texas when they went to Michigan. I think it was around that 7.5. It does kind of feel like a little bit of a trap set by Vegas, just a little bit, doesn't it?
A little bit. The main thing that I'm looking at in this game is we all kind of said when Tennessee played against North Carolina State, like this was Nico I's first big test, and he passed it with flying colors. I mean, they just absolutely obliterated North Carolina State in that game. This is his next test. First road game against the top 25 opponent in a very tough place to play, traditional college football power. This is kind of where you make your mark of, are you going to be that guy? And the thing that I am really looking at is, and I'm glad you brought it up, Matt. The running game. I think that is kind of what separates Tennessee in this game, because obviously when you have a freshman quarterback coming in playing, he's going to make mistakes in this game. It's just going to happen. On the road, like I said, top 25 opponent, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to be a big time atmosphere. The thing that makes me feel good about Tennessee is that if he does start to get into a little trouble, they can rely on that running game. And I think if he starts to make those mistakes, they'll just lean back. And as Matt just said, just kind of pound it down Oklahoma's throat. So I do like Tennessee minus 7.5 here. I think the over is also a very good play here because I think Oklahoma is going to score in this game, but I would be shocked if Tennessee drops less than 35 in this game. So I think Tennessee minus 7.5, and I think the over are the reasonable plays.
And I kind of agree with you on both those picks, Jay Walsh. For me, this does feel like the Tennessee game 2 weeks ago when they played NC State. I took them minus 7.5. I'm just like, they may be just that good. It kind of feels like it's a little bit that situation again. So I kind of like that. But I do think this is probably a little bit more of a higher scoring affair, which does put that over under of 56.5 into play. And I think there's a real good chance that goes over. So we'll move on to the last game that we have on the sheet before we get to our picks. And it is the one I feel like everybody who's viewed this expects now. We always do one of these on Michigan State. They're traveling to Chestnut Hill this weekend to face off against Boston College. It is the red bandana game for Boston College. So that is a very big deal for them. They particularly don't do well in the red bandana game, but we'll leave that point aside. Boston College comes into this game a 6.5 point favorite. The over-under is 45.5. Matt, we'll start with you. Your lock had to do with that Boston College game last week. Boston College apparently covered that game, according to sources that I just found out, 30 minutes ago. I mean, Boston College has had a pretty good start to the season, even though they lost last week. How do you think they match up against this Michigan State team that's really coming off a game where I feel like we didn't learn a ton just because of the caliber of opponent in Prairie View A&M?
Yeah, I would like it known on record that I think Prairie View might have been the worst football team I've ever watched with my own two eyes. That was putrid football. So there really wasn't a lot to gain for Michigan State. Obviously, there's some issues. Penalties were probably the biggest takeaway. Got to be more disciplined, which Jonathan Smith addressed after the game. I still think the running game is too hit or miss. It's boom or bust, and it's mostly bust so far. I think besides their carries of over 10 yards, they have, I think, only like, I forget what the number is off the top of my head, but they're averaging on most runs that if a run doesn't go over 10 yards for them, it's going for 2 yards, which is not good enough at all. It needs to be more consistent and just needs to be better all around. And the offensive line dealing with more injuries with Gavin Brocious being done for the year doesn't help that at all. Nick, you and I were texting back and forth today about, I don't know which Michigan State Twitter account it was that whatever numbers they fudged through the first 3 weeks that claims that Michigan State -3.5 alternative line is the play, which I can't get behind, but hey, I support the narrative pushing on that end. But the other tweet I saw, which feels a lot more accurate too, is we had the Miami game 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now, in year 200 Mel Tucker, which Michigan State went in and won. And then we have the Arizona State game back in 2018. And I think this game feels more like the 2018 game out in the desert, which Michigan State played fine. It was close. It was low scoring against a solid Arizona State team, because I don't think this BC team is super good. I don't think they're a top 25 team in the country, but they're a very strong opponent. There's a reason, and they have qualities that they're really physical. They're really well coached. I think it's the biggest thing under Bill O'Brien that gave them the ability to stay in that game in Columbia. So as much as I would love to sit here and say I think Michigan State covers to 6.5, that's so many points, and what I think might be the most underrated game on this slate this weekend. So I'm gonna take State to cover, but it's not a strong feeling. I think this is gonna be a low scoring game. Like, this could be a 20-14 game very easily.
Jay Walsh, this is probably the most underrated game on the slate this weekend. It's a real shame it's on the ACC network, but we will move on from that. The run game for Michigan State, I feel like we expected a little bit more this season, and kind of like Matt said, it's been really boom or bust, and it's been a lot more bust than it has been boom. Do you think it has to deal with some of those injuries on that offensive line, or do you just think it's figuring out schematics of the new play style from Jonathan Smith?
I think it's a combination of both. I think obviously the O-line injuries hurt. I mean, you lost Christian Phillips for the season. You lost, as Matt said, Gavin Brocious for the season. That's 2 of your starting offensive linemen. That's a tough thing to come back from. And obviously, anytime you have a new head coach, you're going to start off the year a little bit rough around the edges and kind of try to work your way more towards the middle. The thing that I am kind of relatively encouraged about with the running game is we are really seeing kind of a balance in terms of the carries between Nate Carter and Karen Lynch Adams. Lynch Adams, basically since he came here, obviously we've said there have been a lot of boom or bust plays. I would be willing to say that he has made more of the boom plays thus far. He has looked very solid as a transfer running back from UMass. And we know that Nate Carter is a capable running back as well. So this does feel like a team where it just kind of has to come together at some point. Now, granted, I don't necessarily know that this is the week to do it, because this Boston College team has looked very good to start the season. Both of these teams kind of did what I was watching both of these teams very carefully last week, and they kind of both did what I said they needed to do heading into this game, which was Michigan State, I said they needed to win last week's game by 40 points, and they ended up winning 40-0. And then Boston College, I said if they hang tough with a Missouri team that I am personally a fan of, I think Missouri's real this year. But Boston College hung tough with them. So I think both of these teams did what they needed to do going into this week. If I had to pick, I would probably lean Boston College just simply because this is still a very young centered Michigan State team. They're going to make mistakes, and you can't necessarily get away with mistakes in a road game like this. Obviously, they had the great road game that they played against Maryland. They did make mistakes in that game, but they were able to overcome it. I think Boston College is a much better team than Maryland. I think they're going to make the same mistakes, but I think Boston College capitalizes enough to cover that 6.5. But I don't feel great about it because Michigan State is a capable team. So they could theoretically, if they don't make mistakes, they could go out and win this game by 14, I think. But I think the odds are that Boston College covers the 6.5, and that over-under line, I would absolutely go nowhere near that line. If I, gun to my head, had to take one, I would probably take the under. But I think both of these teams are just so volatile, it could really go either way.
And then Jay, one of the big names, transfer names coming into this season was Jack Velling. Feel like we haven't seen kind of what we expected from him so far this season, especially since we are now wrapping up non-conference play. Does this feel like the week we finally kind of see him break out to what he was kind of being hyped up to be coming into this season?
Well, I think you have to see it. I mean, look, this guy's going to be an NFL talent. I mean, this is a guy coming out of Oregon State, I mean, as Oregon State's #1 tight end, and he got a lot of hype in this offseason. He was a big transfer portal addition, big body too. I think this is one of Aiden Child's biggest weapons right now. Outside of Nick Marsh, this is a guy you got to get the football to, and I think if you get him involved, Michigan State has a real chance in this game. You got to get Velling involved, especially in the red zone. He's that red zone target that you can go to, especially for jump ball threats outside of Nick Marsh. You got to go to him as well. I would say if you get him involved, Michigan State has a real chance to win this game. I do agree with Matt. You have to get the run game going as a consistency wise. No more 2-yard gains and, break out for a 20-yard gain there. It's got to be more consistent. And then also I look at Aiden Child's decision-making. Last week, he should have had a pick against Prairie View. There was one, I think the corner just completely dropped it. He's got to make better decisions. I think he has like 5 interceptions so far, and he should have had 6. I think his decision-making really comes into a factor in this game. If he can take care of the ball and use his arm talent, I think Michigan State also has a real chance. But I do agree with Jay Walsh. I think Boston College is the play here. Look, Michigan State was a 9.5-point dog at Maryland, and they ended up winning outright. So this could go really either way. But I think Boston College is the better team. It is a better team than Maryland, I would say. I have to believe when I see it, and I think Boston College they're very well coached, like you said, Matt. Bill O'Brien does a really, really good job. He's a very, very good coach. So I would probably lean Boston College. It's gonna be a low-scoring game, but I think Boston College is the play here. But I can definitely see it being close as well. So
and for me, the biggest thing for me is consistency. I feel like we haven't had a full game this season where it's just been consistent, either good or bad. I think, Jay, you just hit on a lot of the points, in Child's decision-making, the run game, on defense, it feels like it's hit or miss sometimes. I think they're more hit than miss so far this season, though. Just consistency. And this feels like a game where if you're going to play this game, it's either you're going to play Michigan State money line because they're going to win out, or BC to cover. I don't think Michigan State covers the 6.5 and loses this game. I don't see it being that close. I think it's either BC wins this game 7+, or Michigan State wins it outright. So feel like you would be leaving money on the table if you're just taking the 6.5. So given that, it is time to move into each of our parlays for the week. Jay, you got one more thing?
Anyone got a free login I can use for the ACC network? Because unfortunately I do not get it, and I might have to stream this game, unfortunately. And my father has no idea how to do that, so I'm gonna have to help him out with that too. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, I mean it. I don't know who decided to put this game on the ACC network as an 8:00 kickoff. Because 2 weeks ago we were pioneering for this to be a CW game with Tom Brenneman on the call.
Completely robbed.
I just looked at the schedule. The CW does have a game this weekend at 7:30. It is Oregon State hosting Purdue. So I'm great job, guys. Great job.
We were this close to greatness.
We truly were. So let's take a look at the committee standings before we get into the plays. I still sit at the top of the board at 12-7. Matt, you sit in second at 12-11. You are 1-2 on your locks. I am 2-1. Jay, you are also 2-1 on your locks, which puts you ahead of Jay Walsh on the tiebreaker, as Jay Walsh sits at 0-3. Both of you sitting at 9-11. Let's get into these plays. I will start off going first. For the week 4 parlay, as always, going to be 5 games here. First one, Cincinnati -3.5 at home against Houston. Houston, they had the game against Oklahoma where they kept it close. Traveling on the road to Cincinnati, I don't trust them as much. I think Cincinnati, they almost blew the game last week against Miami of Ohio. I think they figure it out this week, get the win there. USC -5.5. We already talked about that game. I like that game there. SMU +2.5 versus TCU at home in the Iron Skillet game. I like SMU here. Home team getting points. Love that. We saw TCU's collapse against UCF last week. That was just bad. And at SMU, I don't think they're awful, which gives them, I think, a better chance to win this game, especially with it being at home. I expect Gerald J. Ford Stadium to be absolutely packed, whether it be with Horned Frog fans or Mustang fans. We'll see. Moving on to my 4th play. We're bringing this back from last week. I'm riding with it again because I can't believe the line is this. Cal +2.5, travel to a god-awful Florida State team. Surely they can't keep getting away with this. I don't know how Florida State is favored in this game, honestly. I think Cal is a better team than Memphis. Maybe not by a ton, but I still think they're better than that. Memphis had their way with Florida State last week. I mean, +2.5. I feel like you're giving away money there, but that's when Vegas really gets you. And then my final play is another game we already talked about. I love Tennessee -7.5 at Oklahoma. And I don't even know if I mentioned it, but Cal, once again, is my lock. Give me that +2.5 at Woke Campbell Stadium when Cal wins, as the Cal Twitter faithful will take over Tallahassee and turn it into Woke Campbell Stadium. Matt, it is your turn. What say you for your parlay this week?
So I decided to switch it up a little bit this week with my formula because I was absolutely just not happy with my performance. So I went through, I picked each game on the slate, and then I went through and decided which games feature good teams playing bad teams. And then I hammered it because I am tired of taking, like, for instance, I actually like TCU this weekend because I think SMU is bad, but I don't think TCU is good enough to warrant being a road favorite in a rivalry game. So that game did not get taken. First game, I'm taking USC 5.5, 6.5. If you can get at 5.5, that'd be preferred because I think at the worst, Michigan can keep this game to a touchdown. I think USC wins this football game, and I think more than likely they blow them out, win by 2 or 3 scores. Second game, I'm taking LSU minus 22.5 against UCLA. UCLA just got trounced at home to Indiana, and I know Indiana is good with Signetti, but LSU has 10 times better athletes, 10 times better everything, better. And now you're going into Death Valley. I think LSU could pick a number and they're going to cover it against this UCLA team, because then UCLA has to get back on the plane, play Oregon next weekend, and then get back on another plane and go out to Oregon or go out to Happy Valley in 2 weeks. This UCLA team is just drowning, and this isn't even a conference game, so it's not like last weekend or in the next couple weeks where that feels like it matters more. They might just walk into Death Valley and just get run over like roadkill. I'm gonna go with Cal at +3 because Cal Twitter is undefeated, and it has been the highlight of my week. And Florida State would struggle with Prairie View. Like this offense is horrible. Like defensively, I think they looked better against Memphis, but unfortunately, DJU in this offense is atrocious, and they can't do anything. So Cal looked covered against San Diego State last week. I think they look good. Going on the road, I think they carry the momentum and get a nice ACC win on the road. Next up, I'm taking Miami in Tampa Bay. They're taking on South Florida. They're 16.5-point favorites, giving Miami minus 16.5. That's my lock of the week. Miami looks really good. They look like the best non-SEC team in the country, potentially. Them and Ohio State. And USF's a fine team out of the American, but they've been okay. They gave Bama a bit of a game, but I think that was more so Alabama didn't show up for the first 3 quarters. And if Cam Ward continues to play the level he's playing at, Miami, once again, can pick a number and they'll cover it this weekend because it's a road game, but it's not a true road game because both teams play in NFL stadiums and the atmosphere kind of sucks. Finally, I have 2 games left. You want to talk about bad football teams? Wyoming, dog shit, led by offensive coordinator Jay Johnson. Give me North Texas -9. North Texas did get blown out by Texas Tech last week, but I think still like North Texas enough. Their quarterback is Chandler Morris, the former quarterback at TCU, so he's got some talent to him. And I think North Texas can cover the 9 easily at home. But Wyoming stinks. They might be slightly better than Kent State. They are awful. They are 0-3, and they haven't looked good by any means the first 3 weeks of the season. And then finally, you want to talk about picking a number. Ole Miss -34 against Georgia Southern. Ole Miss is going to they could put up 60 before halftime. This could be very similar to the Kent State game. Maybe not quite as bad because Georgia Southern is okay out of the Sun Belt. But, I mean, this Ole Miss team, just like Tennessee, has just been putting up numbers on everybody. They went on the road at Wake Forest last week and forced Wake Forest to cancel the return game next year. So Ole Miss, they're going to continue to roll. So yeah, that's my parlay. LSU -22.5, USC -6, Cal +3, Miami, Florida -16.5, North Texas -9, and Ole Miss -34. And my lock is Miami -16.5.
Jay, we'll move on to you. Your parlay this week is what?
Yep, I got 6 plays for you guys. I'm also rolling with Matt here. I do like USC -5.5. Going just Michigan. You don't have a quarterback that can throw a forward pass. I think USC is just a much better team in the spot. Michigan just hasn't played well to prove to me, that they can compete against a good team like this. So I will take USC -5.5 on the road in Ann Arbor. We're going to go to Arkansas, Auburn. Auburn is starting a true freshman, Hank Brown. I like Arkansas on the spot. I think Arkansas, they're not a great football team, but Auburn's also not a great football team at all. And you're starting a true freshman. It's on the road. I get it. I will still take Arkansas. I think they have a chance to really win this game outright to open up SEC play. That's the 3.5. So Arkansas plus 3.5. Georgia Tech +10.5. They are going on the road to, if I can find them, that'd be great. They are going on the road to Louisville. That is correct. Louisville, 10.5 points. That's a pretty big number, in my opinion. Georgia Tech's a pretty solid football team. Louisville's also pretty good. But Georgia Tech, they can run the ball. I will gladly take Georgia Tech plus the 10.5 in that game. I think that's a lot of points to open up ACC play for them. Going to NC State, NC State at Clemson. I think NC State plus the 20.5. That's a lot of points for Clemson, especially for a Clemson team that is, I mean, they're ranked, but they're still not, they're still not great. I'm not really a fan of them this year with Kate Klubnik and those guys. Plus the over-under is 46.5, juiced to the under. That's just a lot of points for me. I will gladly take NC State plus the 20.5 with Grayson McCall. Not a great start for them, but I do like them to cover that 20.5 on the road. We're going to go to Syracuse, and this is my lock, the Carrier Dome, Syracuse against Stanford. I will gladly take Syracuse minus the 8.5 against a Stanford team that's just not very good. With Kyle McCord, you guys do not like that pick at all. I will gladly take Syracuse minus the 8.5 at the Carrier Dome because nobody comes out of the Carrier Dome alive. And then we go to Indiana. I will continue to ride with this Indiana team minus the 28.5 against a bad opponent. So I will take they play Charlotte, I believe. So I will take Indiana minus the 28.5 at home. So those are my picks.
Jay, did you just take an Indiana team and you don't know who they're playing?
No, I don't. I don't care.
They are playing Charlotte, by the way. Say it.
Yeah.
Because I almost put Indiana, but I cannot justify putting Indiana minus 28 against anybody. They could be playing my middle school and they would not. I just can't. You can't do it. But I support
70-3 though.
I will probably still put money on Indiana at some point on Saturday afternoon. So I'll rest assured.
I'll continue to ride with Indiana. I mean, they've been beating up on everybody. So
yeah,
until
as long as game day ends up at Memorial Stadium.
Yes,
I need
exactly. Yes.
the Corso to climb the cannon they have outside the stadium. But anyway,
yes, exactly.
Jay Walsh, you are the final one. Let's see what your parlay looks like for the week.
All right. I am starting off with I'm riding the green wave here, taking Tulane minus 3.5 at Louisiana. In-state game here. Tulane they've hung tough. They're 1-2, but they've hung tough against two very good opponents in Kansas State and Oklahoma. The Oklahoma final score looked a little bit more lopsided than the game really was. Oklahoma scored 10 points in the fourth quarter to kind of separate, but that was a one-score game in the fourth quarter. So Tulane is a very solid team. They've hung tough with two ranked teams this year, and Louisiana has not been tested. I mean, they've played two games against Grambling and Kennesaw State, and they've won both of them handily, but I'm taking the team with more battle-ready experience here. I'm riding with Tulane. The second game, I am also taking the Hoosiers 28.5 against Charlotte. And my reasoning, I know you don't like the 28.5, Matt, but they would have covered the 28.5 last week at UCLA, and they're playing Charlotte this week. Indiana has been running it up on people this year.
I am well aware. I don't feel comfortable with this. Like, you got to kind of ease me into it instead of just going on the road, going out west and winning by 30 against, UCLA is tits. And that's why I took LSU this weekend, because LSU would have to win by less than what Indiana did. But anyways, you know what? I will put money on Indiana this weekend. Rest assured. I was already planning on it, but I will ride with you guys. It's just not going in the parlay.
I think it's a very reasonable pick to make, just simply because, like I said, Indiana clearly has no qualms about running it up this year. I mean, obviously, as Jay said, they beat Western Illinois 77-3. I mean, that's a team that just has no shame. They will score as many points on you as humanly possible. So I'm taking them minus 28.5. Then we get to my lock of the week. I'm going with the Terps here. Maryland minus 17.5 at home against Villanova. Billy Edwards has looked very, very good in his first season as at the helm with the Maryland offense, replacing Talia Tagovailoa. He's looked very solid, just kind of hasn't really made a ton of mistakes, done what he's needed to do, and he's got a certified star at receiver. Ty Felton is a dog. I mean, he's gotten well over 100 yards in every single game they've played this year. In the game against Michigan State, he was damn near unstoppable. I mean, he is one of the best receivers certainly in the Big Ten and possibly the country. I think those two are going to have a field day today against a mediocre FCS Villanova team. I'm going with Maryland here, minus 17.5. And like I said, that is my lock of the week. Hopefully we can get on the board this week. Next pick,
You're
like I
fading
said,
the Big East.
Yes, I am fading the Big East. Big East football, known football conference, the Big East.
R.I.P. Big East football.
Yes, R.I.P. My next pick, as we already kind of went into, I'm rocking with USC Michigan under 46.5. Not going to get too much into this. I just think it's a very good play with the offensive struggles that Michigan has had. Both of these teams are solid defensively. I think 46.5 is a good number for this game, and I think under is a reasonable play. And then my final pick, I don't like doing it, but I'm finally hopping on the bandwagon. I'm taking Miami minus 16.5 against South Florida. I've kind of made it a rule in my life to never bet on Miami. But so I know that now that I am betting on them, I know that they're gonna come out and lay an absolute egg against the Bulls, but they have looked absolutely dominant to start this year. Cam Ward is probably the early Heisman favorite. He has been absolutely phenomenal to start this season. They have just blitzed pretty much everybody that they've played. USF has looked okay, like Matt said. They hung tight with Alabama for a while, but I think Miami right now might be one of the 5 best teams in the country. I think they win this game handily. So I think 16.5 is a good number for them. I'm picking Miami minus 16.5 against South Florida.
Well, gentlemen, looking at the locks for this week, I want to see if you guys pick up on anything. So the locks are Miami, Maryland, Cal, and Syracuse. What do all those schools have in common?
Known ACC schools.
Yes, that is exactly it. We have a packed ACC parlay this week. Of course, Maryland dearly departed the ACC for, of course, greener pastures in the Big Ten. But we are high on the Atlantic Coast Conference this week. So, gentlemen, that is going to wrap it up for this week 4, which means, we're almost a quarter of the way through the season already. It's just wild to think about. We'll be back next week. I think next week, since it will be almost the end of September, we should do a September Heisman segment. We'll give out some awards for those players that, always bring. The Denard Robinson Award for the September Heisman. 4-time champion of that award there. Shout out the Blue Wall Michigan media. But that is going to wrap it up for this week 4 edition of the Merrifield Sportsbook Show. Thank you so much for you guys joining me for this. Thank you to anybody who watched this. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. So make sure you like and subscribe to make sure you are always up to date on the latest in Merrifield Sportsbook. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again next week.